Hey, what is up YouTube? Kolst here, and we're here for the neutral card review for the new expansion Showdown in the Badlands, coming out in like 3 weeks or something. I believe it's November 14th. Before we get started, I'll just say, first of all, they revealed 34 out of 35 cards. There's still, I believe, a legendary yet to be revealed, but I wanted to make this video now because I wanted to put this out before I started doing the class card reviews. So we're just going to do that whenever the neutral legendary, the last card, does get revealed. I'll probably put a card up here to link to whichever random class card review it just happens to get put with. The way I'll do it this time is I'll start out talking about the keywords, and we'll go specifically off of the keyword cards first, and then we're going to move on to the rest of the neutral cards. So with that, you may have noticed that I have a bunch of cards over here, and those are not draftable cards, but those are cards related to the first keyword we'll be talking about, which is Excavate. So the idea of Excavate is that you're essentially going to be digging for treasure. That means that the first time you excavate, these are cards that have text on them that say Excavate. The first time you'll get a 1 mana treasure, the second time you'll get a 2 mana treasure, and then after that you'll get a 3 mana treasure. And in some classes there will be a legendary 4 mana treasure that will be very, very powerful for sure. And the 5 classes that are going to have that, by the way, I do believe they say, are Death Knight, Mage, Rogue, Warlock, and Warrior. Before we get into the cards, like those are the only classes that have those class cards, and also there aren't that many neutral cards that excavate, and you really want the higher level treasures. That's just how this mechanic is going to work. Essentially, it's going to be kind of like the tendrils, where you don't really want to value them super highly, except maybe in those specific classes. Because generally speaking, off of this, you're going to get, like at 1 and 2 mana, you're just going to get like, you know, these are like mildly overpowered cards. I don't want to go really too much over any of them individually. That's why I left them on the screen so you can look at them yourself. But at 3 mana, they start to get really powerful, like Ogre Fist Boulder. This is like, you know, at worst case, you're buffing what, like a 3/2 into a 6/7. You do it twice. That's just a lot of stats, right? That's like 8/8 worth of stats for 3 mana. All these cards are just really, really powerful. This one's like a really upgraded Zilliax here. So that's the idea, is you go for the 3 and effectively, and also as well eventually the 4 mana treasure. That's the whole idea. And we'll move on to start talking about the individual cards as well, because there are just not a lot of them. There are only 2 cards that actually have the Excavate keyword on them effectively. There's this one, but that one doesn't really count. But the first one we have here is Kobold Miner. Neutral 2 mana 1/1 Battlecry, excavate a treasure. That's all it does. You're paying a pretty significant amount for that excavate, as you can see here. A 2 mana 1/1 with a draw would be pretty bad, not completely like terrible nowadays. And you are, as I mentioned, getting like mildly overpowered cards. But if you're not really doing it to really get to the higher level treasures, it's probably, especially for this, just not going to be worth it. And then with that, we move on to the next one, Bounty Board, which is kind of has Excavate synergy. This is a 3 mana 0/5. Your Excavate quick draws, tradables, and legendary cards cost 1 less. You're really not going to want to draft this ever. The one thing would be like if you have a lot of these things randomly and you have like hand buffs or something, I could see it actually maybe working out, but realistically, like you're just never going to draft this. So we're going to move on to the third card here, which is Burrow Buster. 5 mana 6/4 mech with Rush, Battlecry, Excavate a treasure. So that's a much more draftable card, right? You're still overpaying by a bit, I think, but like a 4 mana 6/4 Rush is not terrible, right? Like if it was a 4 mana 6/4 Rush, that would be a really good card. A 5 mana 6/4 Rush, not great, but I mean, you would probably take it sometimes, right? So you're paying much less for that Excavate here. And by the way, I did mention, even though this isn't a class card review, one of the 4 mana treasures, for example, is this. This is the Death Knight one that just got revealed, and this is absolutely crazy. 4 mana 5/5, resurrect your highest cost minion, give it +2/+2 reborn life steal. Like this is going to be like win the game card. So let's to give you an idea of why you want to pick it in those specific classes. If you do not pick in those 5 classes, Death Knight, Mage, Rogue, Warlock, Warrior, you cannot get anything. Any of these super high roll. Not high roll because it's not random, there's only 1. But that you're not getting that big payoff that you're theoretically picking these cards for, right? But like even in those classes, you might still take this one, but especially for like Kobold Miner, you'd probably be a lot less happy to take it. It might be worth grabbing a third one if you just happen to already have 2 of these, right? Like that would be potentially a lot more worth it, but you just wouldn't be valuing these as high as you would in those other classes. In the classes where you have that 4th one to go for, especially if you have a good shot still getting to that point in the draft where you have 4 total excavates, you're going to value this stuff really, really high. And with that, we'll move on to the next mechanic, which actually Bounty Board already did have it, so I guess we could have mentioned it there as well, but it's Quickdraw. The idea of Quickdraw is that it's a bonus if it entered your hand this turn. Obviously, the main ways you have a card enter your hand, first of all, by drawing it naturally, but also you get this if the card gets generated somehow, like you discover it, for example, right? So it's a buff to that, and I'm just gonna say off the bat, we were supposed to be positive about new cards and stuff, but I absolutely hate the idea of this mechanic. I think it's horrible, but you know, we're just gonna talk about it. Hopefully the cards will be fun to make up for the horrendousness of the mechanic from a design level point, in my opinion. But with that, we'll talk about first one here, which is the legendary neutral 3 mana 3/3 Battle Cry. Get a random quick draw card. If you play it this turn, repeat this. So you know, you can compare this. This is essentially a reprint of that Shaman legendary that did the same thing, but just with Shaman spells. This is not discovering. This is giving you random cards, but this is giving you random quick draw cards, which may or may not do what you exactly want them to do. But you're getting the quick draw bonus if you're doing this, because you know that's how quick draw works. So this is going to be probably more random than something like that Shaman legendary was, but I mean, the upside of this thing is going to be absolutely insane because you're getting cards that are in their overpowered form, right? It's going to be pretty random whether or not you get the right ones, but the upside of this is absolutely insane. It'd be a card, and you'll pretty likely get pretty good upside as long as you are able to wait long enough that you have a decent amount of mana to play this. You'll get at least like 1 or 2 quick draw effects. Definitely a very strong legendary for neutral. It's probably not going to be at the level of like a lot of the really strong class legendaries that exist nowadays, but it's definitely a strong card. You'll pick it sometimes. The next quick draw card is Horseshoe Slinger. 3 mana 2/2 Battle Cry. Deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion, quick draw, and one of its neighbors. It says random enemy minion, so it can't go face. So it can't get wasted early game into the face, but the issue is it's still random, and that's going to matter a pretty good amount of the time with this card. Even if it was just 3 mana 2/2 deal 2 to a targeted enemy minion, it still wouldn't be that good. So this is a card where you kind of need to quick draw it, because at that point it's very efficient, but also, you know, sometimes you'll draw it too early so you can't quick draw it, and sometimes, you know, it's just not it won't be the right board state for this to actually work. They might only have 1 minion, so it's just not going to be that good a lot of the time. It can be game winning. You top deck it on turn 3 when your opponent happens to have the perfect board for it, but that's going to be very uncommon. So this thing probably just objectively isn't that great. It'll still be very good sometimes, but just not that often. So I don't think it's a great card, but it's probably still, you know, reasonably pickable. Now we'll move on to the next one, which is Azurite Chain Gang. 4 mana 2/3 with Taunt, Battle Cry, and Quick Draw. Summon a copy of this. So this has a lot of upsides in that, obviously, like if you hand buff it, that would be the idea. That this can be pretty insane. The issue is it would be very hard to actually pull it off where you buff it and quick draw it at the same time. That actually is like nearly impossible. I mean, you have to draw it at the perfect time and happen to have the right cards and not have played them already. You'd be doing it later than turn 4 in that case, so it's going to be just one of those things where sometimes it's 3 taunts. If you get the quick draw, it's 3 taunts for, you know, 2/3. It's very good in that case, and otherwise, I mean, if you do it on curve, it's still fine. On curve without the quick draw, it's still fine, and if you can give up the quick draw maybe to get the hand buff benefits in certain classes, that's also very, very good. So this is a good card. Again, dependence on some of those synergies is going to make it, you know, better in certain classes. I can take advantage like Death Knight and Paladin with hand buffs, for example, but it's going to be a fine card in every class. With that, the last one we have here is Sunspot Dragon. This is a 6 mana 6/6 dragon with tradable and lifesteal. Quick draw, deal 6 damage. So to me, I mean, this is probably going to be the great example of a quick draw card that I absolutely hate. I mean, this is just like one of those things where it's just like, if you draw it at the right time, you absolutely win automatically, basically. And it's a common neutral. So it's going to be all over the place. It's good enough that you take it because It has the added consistency. I mean, it's pretty inconsistent by nature due to the quick draw being pretty darn important to get, but also it has tradable, so you're going to trade it. And I think the thing that's going to make it feel really bad is the dread of once you've seen your opponent trade it, because tradable actually reveals the card. But with that, I think that's just going to make the game feel really bad, because you're going to see it and then you know it's there and you're just like, oh no, and you're going to end up having to play into it at some point, and you're just like, well, I mean, okay, I just hope he doesn't top deck at this exact turn, which usually they won't, but I think it's just going to feel really bad. I don't know. I don't like this card. Because objectively, it's probably pretty darn strong. You're probably supposed to take it a lot, and yeah, it's going to be a meta-defining card as a result of that, and I don't like it. That, we're going to move on to the rest of the neutral cards here. We'll just go in ascending order by cost, I guess. So the first one we have here, Miracle Salesman. 1 mana 2/2 with Death Rattle, get a tradable Snake Oil. There are at least a couple cards that have Snake Oil. What the Snake Oil is, I can't cover it for some reason, it doesn't work. But this is a 0 mana card that has text on it that says deal 0 damage. Oh, there it goes, it finally came up. And the flavor text on the card, this seems useless. It's interesting in this case because another card uses the same card as a downside, but in this case, you are supposed to view as an upside. This is a thing that takes up space, but it adds to your hand size, and if you have spell damage, you can actually use it to deal damage, or you could trigger spells or certain other things like that. Also, you can trade it away to get something that actually does something as well, right, by itself. So this is like probably not worth as much as like a card draw, but it's worth something, right? So overall, this is better than a 1 mana 2/2, but not by a ton. But if you want like just cycle to find something that you have like a really powerful legendary or something that you want to find, it's going to be pretty nice. So overall, this is just a really good one drop that you're going to take pretty often. Going to be one of the better one drops, in especially a neutral in the game. Speaking of good one drops, the next one we have here is Tram Mechanic, a 1 mana 2/1 with Death Rattle. Get a Barrel of Sludge, Toxic Waste, handle with care. So what this one is, this is a 2 mana Fell spell. Fell being in neutral is interesting, but when this is played, discarded, or destroyed, deal 3 damage to the lowest health enemy. So like a lot of things in this expansion, from my pre-review, this is something that's going to be slightly better for certain synergies in certain classes. You have like discard synergy, for example, would be really nice because then you can play it for free. But overall, this is just it's giving you another card where it's like, this isn't probably quite as good as a card you would draft, right? Like you might draft like Dark Bomb, which is just 2 mana deal 3, you get to target it wherever you want. Generally, because this can only hit the lowest health enemy, a lot of times that's going to be what you want to hit, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes you want to hit something else. It's a slightly weaker card, but you're getting it for free because it's attached to a 1 mana 2/1 as well. So overall, essentially getting a 1 mana 2/1 and this card, these are both cards that are slightly worse than cards you would draft, but you're getting 2 for the price of 1. So that's going to make it, again, pretty good. A decent one drop in the game, so a good card to draft. Next up, we have Bunny Stomper. This is a 2 mana 1/3 beast, common as well, with the text, your beasts have rush. And I do believe I'm understanding correctly, hopefully I am, but it should be the case that since your beasts have rush, this thing has rush as well. That's going to make it a lot better. If this thing didn't have a rush itself, it would be pretty hard to draft in most classes. It's going to be class dependent, obviously, because certain classes have a lot more beasts than others. I think it's really Hunter that's going to actually value this probably pretty high due to not just the number of beasts, but the particular beasts they have. But also in general, if you have stuff like Venomous Scorpion, that starts to make this card a lot better, right? But other than that, I think you're not going to want to value this super high unless... The other good thing is that it's a ping and non-ping classes, right? But it's not going to be super valuable just for that. And especially in the modern meta, you just have so many stronger things to do. So it's a bit synergy reliant, but an okay card in some classes, possibly decent like Hunter and maybe Druid or something, but otherwise not a great card in a lot of classes, especially classes that can ping already. Speaking of things that you might need pings for, we have Cactus Rager. This is a 2 mana 5/1 Rager with Poisonous. So compared to like the thing that's funny is like compared to, for example, one of the more recent Ragers, right, or the one still in the game, right? Yeah, the one that has Taunt. Like I think is actually a lot better than that one, because that one having Taunt a lot of times might be a downside. Because this doesn't have Taunt, you can actually play this behind a Taunt, against like a druid or a rogue or a death knight or something, and there's a chance it might actually stick and actually do its job, right? When it had taunt, it made it actually a lot less likely that that would happen, that it would hit either face or something you actually wanted to hit with it for value trading and stuff. And sometimes the poisonous will matter too. And obviously, because it's a giant 1 health minion, it punishes the heck out of, you know, non-ping classes. Overall, that's still probably not going to make it a great card to draft, but it's one of the better ragers for sure. And sometimes you just want to have a better option, so you're definitely going to take this sometimes, but usually you'll have better options. Next up, we have Dry Scale Deputy. This is a 2-mana 2/2 Naga, common as well. Battlecry, the next time you draw a spell, get a copy of it. So Naga synergy for certain classes, of course, somewhat relevant. The big problem with this card is that this is like very, very, very delayed value. First of all, like it's not like generate a spell either. You have to draw a spell. That just doesn't always happen in Arena, you know, like you probably will eventually before the game ends, but like it might be 4, 5, 6 turns or even more before you even draw a spell after you play this, and then you're getting a 2-mana 2/2, which is terrible. And even if you get a spell, it might be pretty unlikely you even get something that you really want to copy. Spells are generally situational, so like you might get something that, you know, you only probably need that one AoE potentially. It depends on how the game goes, but like because they're situational, you're not getting an extra option. That also hurts. If you happen to get something immediately really good that you can cast in relatively quick succession, it's really good, but that's just a lot of conditions. So if you're really desperate for value, you might take this over like other low value cards, but overall I think it's just not going to be consistent enough to make it something you really, really want. But again, you'll sometimes take it because you just want a better option, or you really are desperate for value and you might have things that you particularly want. Next up, we have Gold Panner. This is a 2-mana 1/2, common as well. At the end of your turn, draw a card. So it's like it's like the original Nat Pagel, right? Except it's on a 2-mana 1/2, which probably makes it worse than the original Nat Pagel, but I think this is definitely a good card. I mean, when you're looking at like 2-drops, what you really want is something that's good both early and late. And obviously this can be good early unless your opponent has already like a 1 or a 2-drop on board that'll just eat it. If that happens, it's not going to feel super great. It's not going to be the worst thing, but it's not going to be great. But there's obviously early, there's going to be a chance it sticks, a lot more chance it sticks for multiple turns. And that would be really good to get early draws really fast, right? And then later on, it's also a lot better than most 2-drops because it replaces itself at least. So, you know, that draw is probably gonna be more valuable than just having like +1/+1 in stats, right? So I think this is a good card, and I like, for cards like, compared to a lot of cards like this, like compared to like Caravans and stuff, I like the design of it more than things that were more like kind of, you know, cards that would just get cheesed out and actually win by himself. This is a lot less likely to actually just win the game by itself. So, you know, I think it's a good card. I think you can want to draft it pretty reasonably. There's just so many ways to get value, especially in certain classes, that, you know, like you probably wouldn't want to pick this much in Mage just because you're going to have so many other ways to generate cards anyway. That's just not needed, but especially for classes that need draw, this would be something you're really happy to take. Next up, we have Greedy Partner. This is a 2-mana 2/3, again a common. Battlecry. If you're holding another 2-cost card, get a coin. So these partner cards are really weird. There's going to be a 2-mana, 3-mana, and a 4-mana version, I believe. This is a pretty interesting card, though, as far as like actually having it, because I mean, there's a couple obvious things you can do here. Well, first of all, you're going to have a 2-mana card pretty often. It's just not guaranteed, but you're going to have it pretty often. It's a 2-mana 2/3 in the worst case, and that makes it totally playable. Any 2-mana 2/3 with even possible upside is usually a reasonable card. But you can, for example, if you're on coin and you have 2/2-drops, a lot of times you want to coin 2s anyway. And now with this, you get to coin 2s, go 2 into 2, and then you still have a coin after. That's really good. In any tempo relevant meta, which is pretty much any arena meta ever, that's really powerful. But the downside is it's not really controllable. There are a lot of these mechanics. The one thing I say I don't like about this design wise, and this has to do with like Quickdraw too, this is just completely random stuff that you really don't have a lot of control over. Like, keep in mind, like, you know, you don't just need to have another 2-mana minion. Like, you have a Void Scripture in your hand, you're a mage, you're gonna want to hold that thing for later anyway, and then this is just an upside, so you're getting a 1-mana 2/3, so with possible ramp as well. So yeah, I mean, I do think this is very good, and you're going to want to draft it pretty highly, and unless you somehow don't have 2-drops. And if you don't have any 2-mana cards, you probably have bigger problems. Next up, we have Howdy Finn. This is a 2-mana 2/3 Murloc with the epic tag, so you won't see it very much. Whenever your hand has less than 3 cards in it, get a random Murloc. So that means if you have an empty hand, it's pretty hard to empty your hand nowadays, honestly. But I mean, if you do have an empty hand, this is draw 3 immediately. And then you can keep playing the Murlocs and keep drawing. It's like an insanely good top deck if you happen to have an empty hand somehow. But yeah, so it goes into the same idea where it's like, especially classes that are lacking draws, if you're in a class where it's likely that you're not going to run out of cards, if you happen to get this late and you don't have a lot of card draw, this is super high value, because that's just a lot of refill. Murlocs are probably still not the greatest thing to actually be filling your hand with, but hey, if you're out of value, you'll take whatever you can get, right? So very much a very high potential amount of value, so that's very good. Only downside again is that if you're playing like Mage, for example, this probably has no text on it, so it's not very good. But yeah, if you think it's going to be good, it's an insanely good card, and you would value it very highly. Next up, we'll move past the one we've already talked about, Saloon Brewmaster. This is a 2-mana 2/2 Battle Cry. Return a friendly minion to your hand, but give it +2/+2. So this is, I mean, this is essentially a much better version of Youthful Brewmaster, right? I mean, if you play it on Curve, for example, it's less tempo, but it gives you that +2/+2 hand buff, which is going to be really good with certain things, like if you happen to have that 4-mana Quickdraw taunt card, the Serenite thing. You know, there's certain very obvious synergies that it has there. Since you get that +2/+2, there are going to be times where, you know, that's going to be make it actually a good tempo card. Because, for example, especially if you use it to just, you know, value trade a minion and then you brew it, it might still be a tempo loss immediately, but then you're going to get that tempo back, and obviously it's going to have the same effects as, you know, just Brewmaster. You get to copy Battle Cries and all of that kind of stuff, and Titans, by the way. So overall, yeah, I mean, I do think it's better than Brewmaster, because I think those upsides outweigh the downside of it just not being quite as playable on Curve. Nowadays, it's like a 3/2 on turn 2 isn't even good anyway, so it's like, I think the later value of this is more valuable, so I think it's a better version of Brewmaster. I really didn't take Brewmaster much, but yeah, I'll probably draft this a bit more than I drafted the Youthful one. Next up, we have Trapdoor Spider, 2-mana 1/2. Beast with stealth and poisonous. After your opponent plays a minion, attack it. So this is just the new Gangster, basically. Gangster was the same card, except instead of being a poison, it was a 4/2. The upside of Gangster sometimes was that, you know, sometimes it could actually push damage. This can't. It's becoming more and more relevant as there's more and more spells in the game, actually. It's more relevant that was a thing if Gangster was still in the game right now, and sometimes it will rotate back in. But obviously, as far as like boards, like this is always going to be better than Gangster, and a lot of times it might be a lot better. You can straight up deny a Titan play if you happen to know they have it, or just the fact they do. You can just straight up deny them being able to play a Titan on a turn, for example, because they're going to have to play another minion, or else, you know, the Titan's just going to die immediately. So it has some tactical uses. Any stealth cards, a lot of times will have those tactical uses. So overall, I mean, I think it's annoying enough. It's just probably going to be a reasonable card. A lot of the times it's going to just, you know, your opponent will have like a 1 or a 2 drop to kind of deny it from really getting its full value. Even if they just have a 1/1, you know, they can. It was the same problem with Gangster. They could just play a 1/1 and then ping it or something, or they could play a 2/2 or whatever. It's not always going to be good, but it's going to be good enough of the time that I think this is a pretty good card that you're going to want to draft pretty often, because it's never that bad either. I mean, like, it's just a lot more upside than downside, I think. So next up, we have Whelp Wrangler, a 2-mana 2/3 common. At the end of your turn, get a 1/2 Whelp with taunt. So keep in mind, this says get. What that means is that you get it in your hand. You do not get it on the board. So no, this is not just like a super power creep version of that Death Knight card, the Necromancer. The Whelps are happy Whelps, which is pretty important. So they're really happy. Can you really deny having a bunch of happy Whelps in your hand? I mean, that's pretty cool, honestly. But in any case, it's a pretty good card because it's a 2-mana 2/3, which is drawing card. Admittedly, 1-mana 1/2 taunts are not the greatest card, right? You wouldn't see this as drawing a card every turn. It's a lot worse than that, but it could be still pretty powerful to just drop, like, sometimes you can just fill your curve with them, but sometimes also you can just drop 4 of them at once if you happen to get 4 at once, which your opponent might, because your opponent's not going to feel that pressure to kill this, right? You have upside with any way to hand buff or take advantage of hand size being large as well. Like, there's a lot of upsides to this. Overall, it's probably not going to be that great most of the time, but with certain synergies, it can be really good, especially hand buffs. Again, you're going to draft this pretty often. You're going to be seeing this a lot. Next up, we have Eroded Sentiment. This is a 3-mana 4/3 elemental with Battlecry. If you played an elemental last turn, discover an elemental from the past. Nice. So I think you could still hit Ragnaros with this, actually, even though it's like in the game right now. But anyway, yeah, I don't know exactly what the elementals in the past are. You can hit like Kalamos too. There's some interesting ones, although Kalamos isn't even that good anymore. Overall, I mean, there are going to be some high rolls, but because you're discovering from the past, there's a lot of wild cards and a lot of them are bad. So you're not going to consistently get something great off of this. It's still going to be like good on average. If you're getting a 3-mana 4/3 with a Discover, that's great. But this is going to be, I think, definitely a relatively low value Discover. So you're just not going to want to value this super highly. It'll be worth it if you have a lot of elementals so you can do it all the time. Then it's just, it's going to be good enough that it's a good card. But especially if you don't have a lot of elementals, like, this probably isn't the thing you want to be like betting your game on. It's going to be a bit inconsistent. Except we have an interesting one, Gaslight Gatekeeper. This is a 3-mana 3/4 undead Battlecry. Shuffle your hand into your deck, then draw that many cards. So I forget exactly what it was. There was like a there was a card in like Taverns a Time. It was Taverns, right? I forget, because then they made Caverns, but I think it was Taverns a Time. The arena event from that they did twice. Card that had like a similar kind of effect. It's a very interesting one because a lot of times in arena, you actually just don't want to do this. It can be very awkward. Like, it's good if you play, like, you have a good early game hand. Maybe you dump a couple, like a 1-drop and a 2-drop or 2 1-drops, whatever. And then you get to replace the stuff that wasn't curve and then try to find more curve. That can have some upside. You can shuffle coins and, like the snake oil and stuff, you can shuffle that. There's upside stuff like that too. But the downside is that sometimes you have your Titan in hand, sometimes you have your 4-drop already, you might have the only 4-drop in your deck. You might have the card you actually want to play very soon that you just don't want to shuffle. So this effect can also be, it could be mildly good, it can be very good sometimes, but it can also be very bad. It can be very, very bad, it can be game-losingly bad, so that's going to make it pretty awkward. And it's going to be, again, relatively random based off the game. There's some skill in knowing when you actually should play this, so it's interesting in that way, but I don't know. It's because it's a 3-mana 3/4, like, sometimes you're just going to have to take it even if you don't really want to, because sometimes it'll be good and sometimes it's going to be bad. It's just going to be effectively random, but at least there's skill involved compared to a lot of random. So it's a fine and draftable enough card because there are a lot of bad cards in the game too, so you'll take it sometimes. But yeah, it's gonna be one of those things that's gonna be inconsistent. Next up, we have Gattlesnake, 3-mana 1/5 beast, epic type, so you won't see it that much. At the end of your turn, load 2 bullets that deal 1 damage each, death rattle, fire at random enemies. So the idea of this definitely is that you want to play it as early as possible. If you happen to, there's going to be a way we'll talk very soon. You can actually generate this randomly, and that's going to make it really strong. But you want to play it early, and it's going to be an interesting kind of like game of chicken, because your opponent doesn't really want to kill it, but at the same time they kind of have to, right? Because it's only going to keep getting worse. Because if you get this early on, yeah, I mean, this thing could literally kill the opponent eventually, right? It takes quite a while to get to that point, but yeah, eventually, I mean, this will be doing like 10-20 damage. So I think overall that's going to make it where your opponent just has to deal with it, because eventually you're going to be able to trade it off and do 10 to 50, a lot of damage, and it'll win you the board automatically if they don't kill it. The downside is if you just play this really late, they're still going to have to kill it, and it's still going to do 3 total damage, but you just can't guarantee that's actually going to deal any damage that's useful, right? So this ends up being like probably a worse Star Creeper a lot of the time, sometimes better, but worse in that case. So late game is just not a great card, but yeah, it is like a game-winning card potentially early. I think it's going to turn into a thing where, the opponent is just going to be desperately trying to kill it, and you're going to be desperately trying to keep it alive, right? I think it's one of those things. It's going to be just very, very powerful, I think, overall when it's played early, so. Because again, worst case scenario, it's a tar creeper that kind of forces spell removal because they are going to have to kill it, so. Long-winded way of saying I think it's a very, very strong card. Next up, you guys remember Joust? We have High Noon Duelist, 3 mana 4/3, Death Rattle. Both players draw, destroy the card that draws less. So it's literally Joust, although I think Joust was only battle cries, right? I think. I don't remember exactly. This is a Death Rattle, so it's a funny one. Like, I mean, they purposefully made this a 3 mana 4/3 Death Rattle, so it wouldn't be playable. They knew it wouldn't be playable in Constraint. I mean, maybe there are going to be certain decks that really try to take advantages and can play it if there is like dual Paladin, but they purposely made it an unplayable card. It's still like a good enough card that, I mean, if you're essentially, I don't know, if you're a skilled player, you should just never take this because this is a really bad form of random. If you're a weaker player, you'd be more valued to take it because a 50-50 like this would on average benefit you a lot more. But yeah, you really don't want to, especially if you consider yourself a skilled player, you have a high average, you don't want to take this because it's a symmetric effect, but symmetric effects really hurt you the more skilled you are. So I'll like really want to never take this, but again, it'll depend on you if you want to take it or not. Next up, you have Line Dance Partner, the 3 mana 3/2. Battlecry, if you're holding another 3-cost card, summon a random 3-cost minion. So compared to the last one, I do think, I mean, this one's a lot more high risk, high return compared to the 2 mana partner that gave you the coin. This one's a 3 mana 3/2, and a 3 mana 3/2 is a whole lot worse than a 2 mana 2/3, right? I mean, that's way worse. But this is a much more powerful effect. It's one that would be you'd be a lot more willing to hold on till you can actually get this in theory, but at the same time, if you don't have another 3-cost card on turn 3, you don't have another play, so you might just have to play this anyway, because otherwise you're passing your turn, right? Sometimes. Because a 3 mana 3/2 might still be your best play. But yeah, there are certain high rolls, like that card we mentioned here. You could also generate the dual guy. You can high roll into something like this. Priest is getting a new really powerful high roll 3-drop that you would get off of this. It's a 3 mana 3/7. So there's going to be a lot of high rolls. So it is a potentially powerful and even like game-winning card. But it's it's completely random. So it's completely random whether or not you're really going to be able to trigger it, and also completely random whether or not you high roll it or not. So I kind of hate it, but yeah, it is what it is. Next up, we have Ogre Gang Outlaw, 3 mana 4/4 rush. 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy. So the cool thing about this is that it can rush face. That's really cool, right? Because ogres can do that. I like that aspect of it because rushing face is really the most excellent meme in existence. But these kind of cards can also be kind of triggering to play with or play against because you're putting a lot of stock into coin flips again. That just seems to be the theme of this expansion. Largely uncontrollable RNG actually having like pretty significant impact. But other than that, I mean, it's a 3 mana 4/4 rush, and it's probably good enough because it's overstat. It's probably good enough that you're just going to take it. Because a lot of times on curve, like you're actually not going to care because if it goes face, it's 4 free face damage, right? And it's just not going to be that important that if it misses. So you're going to be taking this a lot, I think. So yeah, that's going to be a big meta player. Next up, we have Dang Blasted Elemental. This is a 4 mana 3/3 elemental with taunt. Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to all minions except friendly elementals. So this card just seems really bad to me. I don't know what they're thinking. Like, this just seems like a balance error, to be honest. Like, this just seems not good. Like, okay, you could throw this into a full elemental deck in theory, but like even then, it's not that good, right? And it's like, no matter how many elementals you think you have, like this is still going to be a downside a decent amount of the time, right? Or at least it's not that big of an upside because it's hitting your board too. So it just seems a little weak. I guess if you know you're just not going to be on board anyway, if you're playing a really greedy deck, it probably won't be reasonable. The problem is that because it's a taunt Death Rattle like this, your opponent can very often just trade off their small things anyway that this thing would have actually killed, and then it's just gonna, not really be that effective on the board, right? That's the big problem. So I think like overall, like it's just not going to be that great of a card. Again, a little bit punishing to aggressive decks, but just not functionally not enough to really make it that good, I think. Next up, we have Ogre Gang Rider. There are going to be 3 total Ogre Gangs and a legendary for payoff, by the way. But 4 mana 3/6 Rush with 50% chance to give your hero +3 attack this turn instead of attacking. I think you can figure out the theme of the Ogre Gang cards at this point. This one is weird because it's like early on, especially on curve, like that is an upside. You know, this effect, like you're going to be pretty happy to take the damage on your face, for example, instead of taking it on the minion. So that'd be the idea of this, is that this thing's going to be effectively like a 3/10 or something, right? It might be very, very large. It's going to be a very good card in that sense. It's a little bit weird because later on, that could be disastrous, right? You just need to kill something, you can't take the face damage, and then this thing doesn't do it, right? So that could be a little bit of a disaster. Having said that, like the upside of that is really, really big. So I think that's also going to be a really good card. So you're going to be drafting this as well a lot, because just getting like effectively a really big overstat minion going to be pretty good. Certain downside if you don't want to combine that with classes, if you're a rogue and you want to dagger something, or you already daggered something, you know, there's some downside there. But yeah, overall on curve it's just going to be so good that you're going to take it a lot. Next up, we have Rowdy Partner. 4 mana 4/3 with a battle cry. If you're holding another 4-cost card, deal 4 damage. So kind of like the 3 mana one, this is one where it's a very good payoff. Like a 4 mana 4/3 that deals 4 is a very good card, but a 4 mana 4/3 that doesn't deal 4 damage is completely garbage. I think I've already talked enough about the partner card, so yeah, it's like one of those things where you just need to be able to trigger this, and you can't really control this very well, whether or not you'll be able to, especially on curve, right? So it's a little bit weird. You can hold on to your 4-cost cards knowing that you might top deck this later. That would be like the one thing you can do to influence it. But overall, it's just going to be pretty random, and I hate it. Next up, talking about things I hate. Sheriff Barrelbrim, 4 mana 4/4, Battle Cry. If you have 20 or less health, open the Badlands Jail. What is the Badlands Jail, you might ask? The most broken card you've ever seen. So, 4 mana 4/3, make a minion go dormant for 3 turns. That's really good. I mean, 3 turns is forever, right? That's the first thing to mention. Okay, like, I mean, that's really long. You can actually even chain this on the same minion if you want to. They get 1 turn to do it, but if it's not a Titan or a Rush, they can't really effectively use it anyway. So you could perma-chain 1 minion for actual eternity with this if you wanted to. Yeah, otherwise, I mean it's just an unbelievable amount of tempo in any case, right? Because it's already, I mean, this is a 4/4. It comes with a 4/4, and I mean, the amount of tempo this is just completely disgusting. It's somewhat delayed, right? But it's just, oh my gosh, yeah, it's just, that's an unbelievably high value there. And the only downside is you have to have 20 or less health, so you have to be under some level of pressure. But I mean, it's only 20, right? Like, I mean, the difference between 15 as existed with like Lion's Guard or something and 20 is huge. If you have any kind of self damage or weapons or whatever, you can get yourself to below 20 so fast, and then this is going to be like just your opponent just won't be able to do anything, right? It's just really brutal. So I mean, this is just a really, really powerful card. This is like going to be effectively the new Silas as far as just being like that broken legendary that exists, that is, you know, going to be, I mean, honestly, like close to as strong as a Titan probably. It's just like really, really good. Next up, we have Snake Oil Seller. 4 mana 4/5 Naga. Death Rattle, shuffle 2 tradable snake oils into your opponent's deck. So this is like, again, like kind of the cool thing they're doing with snake oils is that in this case it's actually a downside because you're shuffling those into your opponent's deck, not giving them to their hand. So then they're going to be, first of all, they're not going to have the deck built around it, right? In theory, that would be the idea, especially in constructed. But also, you know, they're going to draw this instead of a card. So then it's not the worst thing for them, but it means they're going to potentially lose options for some period of time, and then they have to spend the mana to get rid of this, and they might eventually redraw it again, right? They might draw 2 in a row. Like, they can get pretty screwed by this, actually. It's potentially possible. Yeah, effectively, I mean, it's going to be a 4 mana 4/5 with upside most, like, pretty much always, right? So it just makes it, you know, any vanilla stat minion with pretty significant upside pretty good. It's like, it's kind of like, I guess it's, the effect probably isn't as good as like Albatross. Like, giving your opponent 1 mana 1/1s is worse for them, but it's still upside, right? So pretty good card there. Next up, we have Cattle Wrestler. This is a 5 mana 3/4. Battle Cry. Draw a beast, it costs 3 less. It's an epic, you won't see it that much. Probably good because a lot of times you're just not going to draft this because you're not going to have beasts, right? It's obviously a card that's meant to be a really strong tutor and constructed, which you have to wait till turn 5 for, which is awkward. But yeah, I mean, if you have beasts, and especially if you have really powerful beasts, hey, this is really good. You can play this and Scorpid immediately, right? For example, Venomous Scorpid. It's just the big condition. First of all, you have to wait in the ramping. You know, you're not always gonna get a 3-mana beast. You might get a 1-mana beast. You're wasting it, right? There's just a lot of these kind of awkward problems that's gonna make it just not great. And the biggest one is just not having a beast. If you don't have a beast, it's horrible. But it's, again, one of those things where if you have this energy, it's good. You have a lot of 3+ mana beasts that you want, but a lot of decks just won't. Next up, we have the last Ogre Gang card outside Legendary. It is Ogre Gang Ace, the epic one. 5 mana, 5/4 rush. Whenever this attacks, gain Divine Shield, 50% chance to gain Lifesteal instead. This is an interesting one because I don't know if you can actually get Lifesteal multiple times. That's the one thing I don't know, actually. I think it might be able to, actually. That would make it worse. But this one's can be tilting because sometimes you're really going to need Divine Shield and sometimes you're really going to need Lifesteal. So it's not clear which one is the hit, right? They can both be the miss. They could both be really important to get exactly one or the other. But yeah, I mean, it's still a good enough card, right? It could be really bad on curve, you hit Lifesteal, but if you hit Divine Shield, it's amazing. And later on, if you just happen to be desperate for health, right, it could also be game winning there. So I think it's probably weaker. I think it probably is the weakest of the 3, honestly. So, and it's an epic. You won't see it much anyway. Overall, the other ones I think are just better on average. Although if this hits Divine Shield, it's better than the 3-mana one for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's still decent. You might still take it. Especially now in Arena. Even the Lifesteal is a lot more valuable than it used to be. Except we have the big payoff card for all those Ogre Gangs, by the way, which are going to be very good if you even have like 1 or 2 of those. Kingpin Pud. 6 mana, 6/7 Battle Cry. Resurrect your Ogre Gang. Give them Wind Fury. Yeah, so I mean, even if you just, you know, it's just like one of these things where like even if you just resurrect one, even if it's just the 3-mana one, I mean, that's a lot of value. If you have multiple, which you will sometimes, I mean, these are all neutral cards. It's 1 common, 1 rare, some epics. 1 epic, so you won't have that many, but there's a pretty good chance when you see this, you're already going to have one. And then, I mean, yeah, this gets very good very fast the more Ogre Gangs you have. So, because you get even like 3 of these and you probably win automatically, right? So, yeah, it's very, very good if you have this energy. But otherwise, it's an Ogre, which is still, you know, I mean, Ogre is the best card ever, right? So, that's still fine, but, you know, it's not a great card anymore, but like, yeah, this gets very good very fast if you have any synergy at all, which you will a lot of the time, so it's gonna be a pretty good card on average. Next up, we have Azurite Gang. Azurite Giant. This is an 8 mana 8/8 elemental, which costs 1 less for each turn in a row you played an elemental. So we don't know yet like how much synergy exactly there's going to be, but for elementals in general, I don't remember seeing a whole lot of elementals. Let me actually check, but like I don't think there was a neutral, right? And this is gonna be something, you have this, but yeah, there's not a whole lot of elemental synergy in this set. It's obviously very dependent on which class you are, because like, you know, Shaman, for example, has a whole lot of elementals. You have Nimbus, which is really good for this, but a lot of classes just don't have a whole lot of synergy. Mage has some as well, but like a lot of classes have nothing at all, practically. So this is going to be very, very class dependent and potentially rotation dependent as well. Because overall, like, I mean, an 8 mana 8/8 is garbage nowadays. Even like a 6 mana 8/8 isn't that great. It's pretty good. It's alright, but like, you know, you want better than that nowadays. So you really want to be playing this like on turn 5 or something, or even maybe turn 6 or 7, but almost for free, right? To really make this like good. You know, it's just very, very dependent on having that synergy that most decks in most classes just aren't going to have. So I don't think it's a great card overall, but you know, you're in Shaman, you have 3 Nimbus, take this. But yeah, otherwise, not gonna be that great. And last up, we have the card which I believe is actually in your account already if you've logged in recently, is Thunderbringer. This is an 8 mana 6/6 elemental beast with taunt. And Death Rattle, summon an elemental and beast from your deck. This is another weird one where, I mean, it's just going to be... Elemental and beast are both... This is a neutral card, but elemental and beast are both very tribe-dependent synergies. Not every elemental or beast is even cards that are great to pull from your deck. For example, you don't really want to pull the Nimbus out of your deck even. There's a lot of small beasts too. So it's a bit of a weird one. Obviously, if you have certain giant elemental beasts that certain classes or even neutral might have, it could be very good. You don't need that much out of this to have it be good, but like you need something, right? Like this is a name as 6/6 taunt is still completely garbage. You need something pretty significant out of this for it to not be pretty darn mediocre, right? So it's very synergy dependent, but it can work in certain decks. It's just definitely not reliable. But yeah, usually you're going to have better cards in Legendary, most likely. But yeah, I mean, it's usually not going to be... I can't even say it's usually not going to be that bad, because sometimes you're going to have nothing, right? It's just going to be name as 6/6. Not very often, probably. You'll probably have something, but like by the time you're at turn 8, you can't just take this with like one elemental and one beast in your deck, because you're very likely to have drawn it already. That's the other problem. So overall, it's probably just not a great card, but in certain decks, you get a lot of big elementals and beasts somehow by chance. Good, but you know, I think that's enough of that. And I've been talking for like 50 minutes. Wow. So yeah, that was probably a little longer than I want it to be, but there were a lot of cards, and Excavate especially was interesting and worth spending some time talking about. So that is it for us today. I'll probably be doing the class card reviews like tomorrow or something. I might stream those actually. I might be streaming those. I could say now I'll probably make a more formal announcement at some point a little bit later, but I will be dual streaming on Twitch and YouTube a lot more now that that's actually allowed under Twitch TOS. So that's going to be very cool. A lot more of my streams will be on YouTube. So we'll still be trying to, you know, I won't abandon making videos exactly, but yeah, we'll be doing a lot more of that. And that might be where I might do those class card reviews at the beginning of that live stream. That might be the idea. So then I'll play some more as well. Appreciate everyone hanging out. We will see you all in the next one.